It was a chilly September night in 1978 when Margaret Fandel and her sister Kathy returned to their cabin in Sterling, Alaska. The clock had just struck 2 a.m., and the house was eerily quiet. As they stepped inside, they were met with a puzzling sight. The lights were off, a pot of water was boiling on the stove, and an open can of tomatoes and a box of macaroni sat on the counter. But their children, 13-year-old Scott and 8-year-old Amy, were nowhere to be found. The cabin nestled in the woods had no working lock, and the darkness outside seemed to hold secrets that would haunt the family for decades. Scott Curtis Fandel and his younger sister Amy Lee were the heart of the Fandel family. Born on January 23, 1965, Scott was a prankster with a sharp mind, mature beyond his years, and deeply protective of Amy. Amy was born on August 25, 1970. She was a sweet girl who loved dolls, pretty clothes, and shoes. Together they lived with their mother Margaret in a small cabin on Scout Lake Loop Road, just south of Sterling. The home was hidden among trees, lit only by a streetlight out front that cast long shadows across the yard. Margaret had raised them through turbulent times, especially after her bitter divorce from Roger Fandel, Amy's father and Scott, stepfather. Roger had moved to Arizona, leaving Margaret to navigate single parenthood, her struggles with alcohol, and the fallout of his infidelity. Scott, now a teenager, often took on the role of Amy's guardian. In September 1978, Margaret's sister Kathy moved in, bringing a spark of joy to Scott and Amy. On the evening of September 4th, the four of them visited Good Time Charlie's, a local bar and restaurant. While Margaret and Kathy sipped beer, the children played arcade games. As the night wore on, Margaret dropped Scott and Amy off at the cabin around 10 p.m., then drove with Kathy to Connie, 11 miles away, to meet a friend. After returning home, Scott and Amy walked 200 yards to the Lupton family's house, their nearest neighbors and close friends. But the Luptons found the children too noisy that night and sent them back. A neighbor passing by at 11:45 p.m. noticed lights glowing in the Fandel cabin. Yet when Margaret and Kathy returned after 2 a.m., the house was dark, a strange detail as Scott and Amy feared the dark and usually kept the lights on. Inside, the boiling pot and half-prepared snack hinted that Scott had been interrupted while fixing his favorite late-night macaroni. Assuming the children were at the Luptons, Margaret and Kathy went to bed. The next morning, Margaret left for her waitressing job and Kathy slept in. It was until Margaret called the school intending to reprimand Amy for not stopping by that she learned neither child had attended class. Her boss refused to let her leave early, delaying her panic until later. When the Lupton children visited that afternoon, they confirmed Scott and Amy had stayed over. The realization hit hard. The siblings were missing. At 5:14 p.m. on September 5th, Margaret called the Alaska State Troopers. The search began immediately. Dogs from Anchorage scoured the woods. Ferries were checked, and Canadian Mounties were alerted. Roger flew in from Arizona to help, but no trace of the children emerged. Bullet casings found outside the cabin raised questions, yet their relevance remained unclear. Investigators uncovered a fleeting lead. 2 carnival workers, casual acquaintances of the Fandels, were seen speeding away in a black sedan that night. Margaret had let them stay over in late August, but they claimed they'd return the following night to pick up paychecks and decided not to visit. A witness later doubted the sighting's date, and the trail went cold. Another theory suggested someone at Good Time Charlie overheard the children would be alone, but this too lacked proof. Hundreds of tips led nowhere. Suspicion soon turned inward. Roger accused his uncle Herman, who in turn suspected Roger. Law enforcement dug up Herman's yard. Nothing. Roger remained a person of interest for years, though eventually cleared. Margaret's phone was tapped, but she said nothing incriminating. Still, whispers in Sterling blamed her, and psychics bombarded her with visions, deepening her despair. Her drinking worsened, and by 1980, she left Alaska for Illinois, later quitting alcohol and remarrying. In a 1988 interview, she clung to hope that Scott and Amy were alive. Roger disagreed, certain Scott would have reached out if he could. The Fandel cabin burned down in 1980, its cause a mystery. Margaret's brother Terry Schoenfelder believed Amy survived, perhaps living in Alaska, Montana, or California, though his reasoning was vague. He even pointed to a woman named Amy interacting with Roger on Facebook, but she denied being the missing girl. Online forums buzzed with theories, drug deals, family plots, but no evidence stuck. Decades later, the fate of Scott and Amy Fandel remains unknown. No one has been charged, and the case stands as one of Alaska's most enduring enigmas. The boiling water, the tomatoes, the macaroni, these silent clues mark a night when two children slipped into the void.